My name is Sarah. I used to think my voice didn't matter, until they tried to silence it completely. I was never the girl who commanded attention. In the hallways of Lincoln High, I was the one who fixed broken microphones, untangled speaker wires, and made sure the spotlight hit just right on someone else's face. The theater kids knew my name, but only when they needed something. Sarah, can you adjust the sound levels? Sarah, the mic is cutting out again. I was useful, reliable, invisible. That's exactly where they expected me to stay. The annual open mic night was supposed to be different. For weeks, I'd been watching the usual suspects claim their spots. Emma with her perfectly timed comedy routine, Marcus with his spoken word that made teachers nod approvingly, the theater crowd with their dramatic monologues that always earned standing ovations. They moved through that space like they owned it, like the stage was built specifically for their voices. I'd written something too. Something real. Something that came from the quiet corners of my heart where I kept all the words I'd never had the courage to speak. It wasn't polished or rehearsed to death. It was just mine. The night arrived with that electric energy that fills school auditoriums during big events. Parents clutched programs, students whispered in clusters, and I stood backstage with sweaty palms and a folded piece of paper that held my entire soul. When they called for volunteers, I felt my feet moving before my brain could stop them. I'd like to go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma turned around, eyebrows raised. You? Sarah, you're not really the stage type. But Mrs. Rodriguez, our drama teacher, nodded encouragingly. Everyone deserves a chance to be heard. Before we continue, drop a comment. Where are you watching this from and what time is it there? I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. I walked to the center of that stage on shaking legs, the hot lights making everything feel surreal and exposed. The microphone felt foreign in my hands, heavier than it should have been. I looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some already bored, some openly smirking. Hi, I started, my voice cracking slightly. I'm Sarah, and I wanted to share something I wrote about. That's when it happened. Emma, standing just off stage in the wings, stepped forward with what looked like an innocent stumble. Her shoulder connected with mine, not hard enough to be obvious, but firm enough to send me sideways. My foot caught the edge of the stage, and suddenly I was falling, tumbling off the platform in front of 300 people. The laughter started immediately. Not the shocked gasps you'd expect when someone gets hurt, but genuine amusement. Like my fall was the evening's entertainment. Like I was a clumsy sidekick in someone else's story. I landed hard on my elbow, the sharp pain shooting up my arm as I tried to process what had just happened. The paper with my words scattered across the floor, and I watched from below as Emma smoothly took the microphone. Sorry about that, everyone, she said with a perfectly practiced smile. Looks like we're all a little nervous tonight, but the show must go on, right? More laughter. Approving nods. And I sat there on the cold gymnasium floor, invisible again, but this time in the worst possible way. No one helped me up. Not one person in that entire auditorium moved to see if I was okay. Mrs. Rodriguez was busy managing the technical difficulties my fall had caused, and the other students just watched. Like I was a brief interruption in their regularly scheduled programming. I picked myself up, gathered the pieces of my scattered words, and walked out through the back exit. The sound of Emma's voice followed me, confident, engaging, everything mine wasn't supposed to be. That night, I sat in my bedroom with an ice pack on my elbow and something much deeper than physical pain spreading through my chest. My parents were at their book club, the house quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. I kept replaying those seconds, the shove, the fall, the laughter, wondering how I could have been so stupid to think I belonged up there. My phone buzzed with notifications. Videos of my fall were already making rounds on social media. "Epic stage fail at Lincoln High," read one caption. Laughing emojis filled the comments. No one asked if I was hurt. No one seemed to remember that I was a real person with real feelings behind that moment of public humiliation. Deleted the apps and turned off my phone. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in social invisibility. I walked through school like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, keeping my head down. The theater kids still needed me for tech work, but now there was a different energy, a careful politeness that felt worse than outright cruelty. They pitied me, and somehow that stung more than the laughter had. "You know," Marcus said one afternoon as I adjusted his microphone levels, "maybe some people are just meant to work behind the scenes. There's no shame in that." He meant it kindly, but his words landed like stones in my stomach. Was that really all I was? Background noise in everyone else's symphony? I stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria, choosing instead to spend those 30 minutes in the empty auditorium. I'd sit in the back row and stare at that stage, the scene of my humiliation, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Was it really just about Emma's shove, or had I been fooling myself from the beginning? Maybe I never belonged up there. Maybe they'd all seen something I couldn't see about myself. But in those quiet moments, surrounded by empty seats and dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, something else started to grow. It was small at first, barely noticeable, like a seed pushing through concrete. It was the memory of how it felt to hold that microphone, even for those brief seconds before everything went wrong. The weight of it, the potential of it, the way my voice had started to emerge from somewhere deep inside me. I began to write, again, but differently this time. Not just words on paper, but observations about the way voices carry in empty spaces, about the acoustics of truth, about the difference between being heard and being listened to. I filled notebook after notebook with thoughts I'd never spoken aloud, and I started to pay attention, really pay attention, to how the popular kids commanded their space. It wasn't just confidence, though that was part of it. It was timing, presence, the ability to make silence work for them instead of against them. They understood that the pause before speaking could be more powerful than the words themselves. I practiced in my bedroom mirror, not Emma's comedy routines or Marcus's spoken word, but my own voice saying my own words. I recorded myself on my phone, playing it back until I could hear the moments where uncertainty crept in, where my voice got small and apologetic. I learned to sit with the discomfort of hearing myself until it became familiar, then comfortable, then strong. Mrs. Rodriguez found me in the auditorium one afternoon, sitting in my usual back row seat with a notebook spread across my lap. "You know," she said, settling into the seat beside me, "I've been teaching here for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of kids get knocked down. Some of them stay down, others—" She paused, looking toward the stage. "Others use the fall to figure out how to fly." I didn't respond immediately, but something in her words resonated in that growing space inside my chest. "I should have stopped it," she continued. "What happened to you that night? I should have said something, done something. I failed you as a teacher, and I'm sorry." It was the first time anyone had acknowledged that what happened wasn't just an accident, wasn't just my clumsiness or bad luck. Someone had seen the truth of it, and that validation felt like oxygen after months of holding my breath. "I have an idea," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "The spring talent showcase is coming up. I need someone to close the show. Someone who understands that the best performances come from the deepest places. Interested?" My first instinct was to say no, to retreat back into the safety of invisibility. But that seed inside me had been growing, and now it was pushing against the walls I'd built. Around it, "What if I fall again?" I asked. "Then you get back up again," she said simply. "But this time, you'll know that falling isn't the end of the story. It's just the middle." I said yes. The next few months became a different kind of education. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't just hand me a slot in the showcase and wish me luck. She taught me about presence, about owning space, about the difference between performing and sharing. We worked after school in the empty auditorium, just the two of us and the ghost of my former humiliation. "Your voice is already strong," she told me during one of our sessions. "You just need to trust it." I rewrote my original piece, the one that had scattered across the floor that night. But this version was different, deeper, more honest, shaped by the months of silence and observation. It wasn't about trying to prove I belonged anymore. It was about claiming the space I'd always deserved. At home, my parents noticed the change without understanding it. I'd always been their quiet daughter, the one who didn't cause trouble or demand attention. Now I was still quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. Focused, intentional, full of something they couldn't quite name. "You seem different lately," my mom said one evening as we washed dishes together. "More present." I smiled, thinking about how right she was. I was present in a way I'd never been before. Present in my own life, in my own skin, in my own voice. The school buzzed with anticipation as the spring showcase approached. The same faces claimed their spots. Emma with a new comedy routine, Marcus with another spoken word piece, the theater crowd with their latest dramatic interpretations. But this time, I wasn't watching from the wings with envy or longing. I was preparing. Word spread that I'd be closing the show, and the reactions were exactly what I expected. Whispers in hallways, raised eyebrows, the kind of careful curiosity people show when they're not sure if they're about to witness something brilliant or another spectacular failure. "Is that really a good idea?" I overheard Emma asking Mrs. Rodriguez. "I mean, after what happened last time, everyone deserves a second chance," Mrs. Rodriguez replied firmly. "Sometimes the best voices are the ones that have been tested." 3 days before the showcase, I found a note slipped through the vents of my locker. "Save yourself the embarrassment," it read in careful handwriting. "Some people aren't meant for the spotlight." I stared at those words for a long moment, feeling the old familiar sting try to take root in my chest. But something had changed in me over these months of quiet growth. The sting was still there, but it couldn't find purchase anymore. It slid off me like water off glass. I crumpled the note and threw it away. The night of the showcase arrived with the same electric energy as before, but this time I experienced it differently. I wasn't hiding backstage, heart pounding with terror. I was centered, grounded, ready. My piece was memorized not just in my head, but in my bones, my breathing, my entire being. I watched the other performances from the wings, noting the rhythms, the way audiences responded, the ebb and flow of attention and energy. When Emma took the stage with her routine, I noticed things I'd never seen before. The slight hesitation before her punchlines, the way she scanned the audience for approval, the subtle insecurity beneath her polished exterior. Marcus delivered, his spoken word with his usual passion. But I could hear the performance in it now. The way he'd calculated every gesture and emphasis. It was skillful, but it lacked something essential. The raw authenticity that comes from having something real to say. As the night progressed, I felt that familiar electricity building. But this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. Not for approval or applause, but for the moment when I could finally say what I'd been preparing to say for months. Mrs. Rodriguez found me as the second to last act was finishing. "Ready?" she asked. I looked out at the stage where I'd fallen, where I'd been laughed at, where I'd learned that sometimes the most important lessons come wrapped in humiliation. "I've been ready for months," I said. She squeezed my shoulder. "Remember, you're not performing for them. You're sharing with them. There's a difference." The last act finished to enthusiastic applause, and Mrs. Rodriguez walked to the microphone for the closing introduction. The auditorium was full, 300 people, maybe more. Parents, Students, teachers, all of them expecting entertainment. Closure. The familiar comfort of a well-executed ending. "Our final performer tonight," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system I'd helped perfect, "is someone who understands that the most powerful voices often come from the quietest places. Please welcome Sarah Mitchell." I walked onto that stage with steady steps, no trembling legs this time. The lights felt warm instead of harsh, and the microphone felt like it belonged in my hands. I could see faces in the audience, some curious, some skeptical, some genuinely interested in what I might have to say. In the wings, I caught sight of Emma, her expression unreadable. I stood at center stage for a moment, letting the silence settle around me like a comfortable blanket. Mrs. Rodriguez had taught me that silence wasn't empty space to be filled with nervous energy. It was potential, waiting to be shaped by intention. "Hi," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, and 5 months ago, I fell off this stage." A ripple of recognition went through the audience. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward with interest. "I fell because someone pushed me. But that's not really what this is about. I fell because I was trying to be something I thought you wanted me to be, instead of being something I actually was. I fell because I was so afraid of taking up space that I forgot I had something worth sharing." The auditorium was completely quiet now, the kind of attention that feels like a held breath. For months after that, I believed the story that fall told about me. That I was clumsy, forgettable, not meant for stages or spotlights or any kind of visibility. I believed that some people are just meant to work behind the scenes, meant to make other people shine while staying safely invisible. Themselves. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the faces in front of me. I could see Emma in my peripheral vision, her confident posture beginning to shift. But here's what I learned in those quiet months. Visibility isn't about taking up space. It's about filling the space you're in with truth. And truth doesn't need permission to exist. My voice was growing stronger, not louder but more present, more certain. I spent so much time studying the way confident people move through the world, thinking I needed to copy their gestures, their timing, their energy. But confidence isn't a performance. It's not something you put on like a costume. It's something you discover when you stop apologizing for existing. The silence in the auditorium felt different now. Not the polite attention of people waiting for entertainment, but the focused attention of people recognizing something real. The truth is, I was never meant to be invisible. None of us are. We're meant to take up exactly the amount of space our truth requires. No more, no less. And my truth is this. I have something to say, and I'm not asking permission to say it anymore. I saw tears in some faces, recognition in others. Mrs. Rodriguez was smiling from the wings, and even some of the students who'd laughed at my fall were listening with something approaching respect. The night I fell, someone shoved me off this stage like I was nothing. Tonight, I'm standing here because I finally understand that I was never nothing. I was just quiet. And there's a difference between being silenced and choosing when to speak. I took a breath, feeling the weight of every word I was about to say. So this is me, speaking. This is me, taking up space. This is me, refusing to be pushed into the shadows by people who are threatened by voices they can't control. Because the thing about falling is that it teaches you something invaluable. It teaches you that you can get back up. And once you know that, once you really know it in your bones, nobody can push you down again. The applause started slowly, from the back of the auditorium. One person, then two, then a wave of recognition that built and built until the entire room was on its feet. But this wasn't the polite applause that follows a good performance. This was something deeper. Acknowledgement, respect, the sound of people recognizing truth when they hear it. I stood in that applause, not basking in it but receiving it, letting it wash over me like confirmation of something I'd always known, but had been too afraid to believe. I belonged here. I'd always belonged here. As the applause began to fade, someone in the back shouted, "That's what I'm talking about," and the energy in the room shifted again, becoming warmer, more personal, more real. I looked toward the wings where Emma stood, her face pale, her confident mask finally slipping. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw something there I'd never seen before, uncertainty, maybe even shame. But I felt no triumph in it, no satisfaction in her discomfort. I felt only the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are. After the show, people approached me with a different energy than I'd ever experienced, not the polite congratulations that follow a decent performance, but genuine connection. Students I'd never spoken to told me about their own experiences with invisibility, with being pushed aside, with finding their voices. Teachers shared stories of their own struggles with belonging and authenticity. Emma approached me as I was packing up my things. She stood awkwardly at the edge of my space, clearly uncomfortable but determined to speak. "Sarah," she started, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words that didn't come easily. What I did that night." I looked at her fully, seeing not the confident performer who'd pushed me off the stage, but a girl who'd been so threatened by someone else's potential that she'd felt the need to diminish it. "You pushed me," I said simply. "And I fell. And then I got back up." She nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I was scared," she whispered. "You were saying something real, and I never say anything real. I just perform." I felt a surprising rush of compassion for her, for the prison of performance she'd built around herself, for the exhaustion that must come from never being able to just exist without a script. "It's not too late," I told her. "To say something real, it's never too late." She nodded again, wiping her eyes, and walked away without another word. Mrs. Rodriguez found me as I was finally leaving the auditorium. "You know," she said, "I've been teaching for 15 years, and that's the first time I've seen someone transform a room just by telling the truth." I smiled, feeling the weight of the evening settling into my bones, becoming part of my story. "I didn't transform the room," I said. I just stopped hiding. Walking home that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The fall, the laughter, the months of silence and growth, the decision to trust my own voice. It hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Some lessons can only be learned in the darkness, in the quiet spaces where we're forced to confront who we really are beneath all the noise and performance. My phone buzzed with messages. Friends, classmates, even strangers who'd been in the audience, all wanting to connect, to share their own stories, to thank me for saying something they'd needed to hear. But I didn't check them right away. I wanted to sit with this moment, this feeling of having finally arrived in my own life. 6 months ago, I was the girl who fixed microphones and stayed invisible. Tonight, I was the girl who stood center stage and refused to apologize for existing. Both versions were true. Both were part of my story. But only one of them was my choice. They thought they could push me off the stage and keep me there. They thought laughter could diminish me, that silence could erase me, that invisibility could become my permanent address. They were wrong. I walked back onto that stage with something more powerful than confidence. I walked back with truth, and truth once spoken can never be unheard. They deleted me from their circle, tried to edit me out of their story, but they couldn't delete me from my own. And in the end, that's the only story that really matters. The one where I refused to let anyone else hold the microphone to my life.